Yep.
Good afternoon, Chairman Ball.
Thank you, sir.
Members of the committee.
Will you identify yourself?
My name is Robert Morris. I'm the first Vice President of the Port Authority, PBA. On behalf of the men and women that I represent, I thank you for the opportunity to address the committee on our department's communication issues and security issues in general. You have just heard from Michael O'Meara of the MTA Police. O'Meara described the department where the radios were antiquated and a safety hazard to his members and the public, but where proper oversight by state authorities convinced the MTA of the need to invest in the safety of their police officers and, by extension, the public that relies on these officers for their safety. Let me present the other side. An agency targeted multiple times by the worst terrorist attacks in the history of the United States. An agency who has had so little regard for the citizens of New York and New Jersey region and the men and women who work for them that they have refused to install a functional and up-to-date radio system operable within the department and interoperable according to federal guidelines. This agency is the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Unfortunately, unlike the MTA, neither the federal nor state government safety laws govern the Port Authority. It's a bi-state agency. We have no recourse to force the Port Authority to meet basic public safety standards. So we have no choice but to come to this committee.
Robert, I need you to speak into the mic. Sorry for interrupting.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I've been a Port Authority police officer since 1985 and have been assigned to the Port Authority Bus Terminal, LaGuardia Airport, Kennedy Airport. In 1992, Port Authority embarked on a modernization of its then antiquated police radio system. At that time, an 800 megahertz system was chosen and deployment began a couple of years later. Although interoperable protocols existed at that time, such as Project 25 or P25 as it's known, the Port Authority chose to build a proprietary system that would not work with other agencies' systems. Although the system could have been built with redundant backup, the Port Authority chose not to. September 11th, 2001 is without a doubt the most tragic day in Port Authority Police Department history and Port Authority history. The agency lost 84 employees, including 37 police officers. This is the largest single-day loss of police officers by any department in the history of U.S. law enforcement. According to the 9/11 Commission report, the single largest reason why 37 of my colleagues died on September 11th was because they did not receive the radio transmission ordering them to evacuate. Due to falling debris and fire, much of our 800 megahertz radio system was totally out and there was no backup system in place. Many officers were deployed from commands that did not have 800 megahertz capabilities. Many of the 343 FDNY and 23 NYPD personnel lost on September 11th also did not hear the call to evacuate because PAPD, NYPD, and FDNY did not have interoperable radio frequencies. Although September 11th stands out in the history of our department, this was not an isolated incident in the history of the Port Authority. No other agency in the history of the United States has been as frequent a target of devastating and deadly terrorist attacks. 8 years prior to September 11th, the World Trade Center was attacked by terrorists, killing 7 and injuring more than 1,000. In 1981, a bomb exploded in the Pan Am terminal at JFK, killing 1. International terrorism first struck the agency in 1975, when a bomb killed 11 and injured 79 at LaGuardia Airport. Terrorist attacks are not new at the Port Authority. Unfortunately for the men and women I represent, failing to prepare for terrorist attacks is not new either. Despite all problems exposed by the September 11th attacks, the Port Authority continues to operate as if it is September 10th, 2001. In 2005, the Port Authority and JetBlue began construction of a new Terminal 5 at Kennedy Airport. The Port Authority was intimately involved in planning this project. The agency failed to include repeaters for our police radio system in the plans. 6 months before the terminal opened in 2008, the Port Authority became aware that our radio system would not work. In the 3 years since that time, the Port Authority has failed to retrofit that building with an operable 800 megahertz system. Our police officers who are posted in that terminal building are issued department cell phones as their sole means of communication with the police desk. To get an emergency backup to their location, they have to stop and call the police desk on a cell phone. Throughout the 10 years since 9/11, Port Authority has invested more and more money, approximately $110 million to date, in its proprietary radio system. In 2010, their current provider...
I need you to go back to that point on the cell phone. I'm sorry for interrupting, but can you repeat that point?
Sure. To get an emergency backup to their location in Terminal 5 at JFK Airport, the police officer has to call the police desk using a department-issued cell phone. They get issued a department cell phone for the tour.
Now, do you see men and women using their personal, and I ask this of both of you, using their personal cell phones to communicate in the line of work?
All almost. We had a question from, and I'm sure Bobby has it from police officers, that if could they write off the cost of their cell phone on their taxes because it's their only means of communications with their police department.
And on 9/11,
The officer carries a radio on his belt while he's in the terminal, but he might as well be carrying a brick. In 2010, the current provider for the radio systems to the Port Authority, Harris Incorporated, announced that they would no longer support the Port Authority system at the end of this calendar year. Harris's announcement indicated that the PA system had been superseded by superior equipment operating on a P25 standard or through IP-based technology. Despite this announcement, the Port Authority recently contracted to have some 800 megahertz system installed in the new World Trade Center site at the cost of $122 million. Despite the monetary investment, the radio system remains a failure. Every command has multiple dead spots, leaving police officers without communications at those locations. The path train system does not provide communication between police officers in the field. All communication has to go to the police desk, and the police desk has to communicate back to the officer, often when they're on the same train station. The George Washington Bridge's 800 megahertz system was only deployed this past February. That's nearly 10 years after 9/11 and nearly 20 years after this radio modernization began. The 800 megahertz radio system has completely failed at several commands for hours at a time. The Port Authority's failure to properly fix radio communications is just one of many glaring security lapses. Since the attacks of September 11th, the Port Authority PBA has been requesting better equipment, technology, and staffing to properly secure the most prime terrorist targets that we patrol. Yet at every turn, the Port Authority chose to bury its head in the sand rather than secure the most important infrastructure in the states of New York and New Jersey. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I am prepared to outline 4 extremely serious examples of clear threats to public safety that the Port Authority is consciously overlooking, as they did prior to the first bombing in 1993 at the Trade Center. However, because of the extreme sensitivity of these issues and the fact that they identify specific potential terrorist targets for terrorists, they have been redacted on all copies of this testimony except the original, which I had given to you earlier. The decision as to what, if any, of this information you choose to make public is up to you.
Senator Griffo? Senator,
Well, thank you both very much, and I appreciate your service to our community. My concern here is I'm hearing that you have both internal and external problems. And if you look at 10 years later, I mean, from my perspective, I can't understand why this would not be a priority and there isn't dedication of resources for this effort. So I guess my question to you is, if you can't communicate effectively, that doesn't allow you to coordinate or to conduct the mission effectively. So where's the accountability here? Who do you believe should accept this accountability and responsibility for the failure that we're hearing about here today? Because I think this is unacceptable.
You're correct. The accountability lies with the. I mean, the problem is that there is this melting pot or cornucopia of different things where we have grants from the federal government, we have grants from New York State, we have the Port Authority who's trying to install a multi-$100 million system, the MTA who's trying to put in another $100 million. You know, there's no coordination of effort. The New York State Police, the police that cover the entire state of New York, the New York State Police, are in the same situation as us. They cannot communicate with each other. And, you know, I don't know what we can do. You know, we are all trying separately and apart to try to put this together, but, you know, that's why we're here today. We're here today to point it out to you gentlemen and to tell you that, you know, we know it's been 10 years since the attacks, and we're running into a brick wall.
Senator, to answer your question more directly, many of the same managers continue to be high-level decision makers at the Port Authority, and they continue to make questionable decisions about security, decisions that they do not have the expertise to make, and decisions that are made without oversight. That's why we're here asking this committee to provide some oversight.
Thank you.
Senator Adaba?
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. Real quick question, Mr. Morris. After the published reports about JFK and the radio issues at JetBlue, I had called the Port Authority because that's adjacent to my district, and they said it is an issue that they are addressing and should not be a non-issue in the very near future. Is that your take on it as well?
It shouldn't be an issue at all. It is.
They're working on it,
This term, they've been working on it, so we've been told since 2008 when they became aware that the system did not work, hence the cell phone distribution at roll calls.
You don't think the situation will be resolved anytime soon?
We were told it would be corrected 6 months. That was a year and a half ago. And then 6 months thereafter, and it'll be fixed in another 6 months. It still goes unaddressed.